Action.
I want to thank Bob O'Kelly and Elise Wheeler for taking the time to spend with me. The children's fairy story I will read was written by myself a good few years ago for my grandchildren. My goal was to also do all the artwork, but due to a series of sickness, deaths, surgeries, etc., it was put on hold for a good while. Now I'm finally motivated to complete it and have painted a good few of the pictures with more to come. Therefore, this book will be for the great-grandchildren, with number 9 on the way in November. The Adventures of Misty and the Water Fairies, written and illustrated by Anita Wright. Prologue. Deep in the heart of the green, peaceful English countryside, in a charming thatched cottage with a river running by, lived a young girl named Misty. This is the story of her adventures with Blue Jay and the Water Fairies. The Adventures of Misty and Blue Jay by Anita Wright. Characters. Misty, main character. Blue Jay, of happiness, bird. Pure Gold, princess. Beldina, baby. Prince Braveheart, husband and father. Green Eyes, wicked witch. Misty sat at her bedroom window. She should long ago have been fast asleep. The house was quiet and it was night time. But Misty was waiting, her eyes looking down towards the pool of moonlight shimmering on the silver water of the river, which meandered gently past the green slopes of her home like a silken strip of ribbon. The moonlight shimmered and seemed to glow and spread, and as she waited, one glimmering beam loosened itself and danced a golden path towards her window. Misty opened her window gently, her eyes glowing with excitement. Now, the time had come. There, perched on the limb of the willow, near the water's edge, was the Blue Jay of happiness. His golden notes trilled and called. It was time for the enchanted water fairies to come out and play and dance and sing, and Misty was to join them. Only when the moon was at its roundest and glowed like a golden ball, and only when the river sang its haunting, sweet sighing song, did they appear, and Misty had been waiting for this night. The moonbeam made a golden path towards her window, stretching like a shining slide. Without hesitation, Misty climbed onto it and glided down towards the riverbank. There, already awaiting her, was Prince Braveheart, Prince of the Water Fairies, and he took her hand and he led her to the rest of his kingdom in the clearing of a small wooded area, sheltered by pines and friendly fir trees. Already there was great activity among the water folks. A tall pole was set up, garlanded with sweet-smelling flowers, and bright ribbons around which they would dance. Sat upon the tree stumps were tasty foods, dainty cakes, tiny sugar sweets, and other delights. Everybody was happy and laughing and busily preparing for the night's festivities. And there in the center, perched on the largest stump, with thick soft moss to cushion it and honeysuckle all around, sat the beautiful Princess Pure Gold. Her sweet baby Beldina lay in a cushion of new grass at her feet, smiling her dimpled, happy smile. Misty ran forward. How she loved Pure Gold. She was so beautiful and good. Her lovely golden hair glimmered and shone, and her blue eyes smiled a welcome at Misty. The frogs from the river had gathered together to add their croaks to the music. Blue Jay, perched up on a tree, was also ready with his clear trilling notes. The crickets were practicing rubbing their back legs together to produce their humming, and Prince Braveheart was to lead with his fiddle. They were such a happy, joyful group, and were so busy, engrossed in their preparations, that they had forgotten the one sour note which could spoil their evening. This was Green Eyes, the jealous, envious water sprite, who lived in the deepest, darkest part of the river. Green Eyes was also beautiful, but she had a nasty, spiteful nature. She was so jealous of Pure Gold and wanted the prince and baby Baldina for herself. Green Eyes had magical qualities. She could change her form and shape and appear like anyone she wanted to be. The only thing she could not change was the color of her eyes. They shone brightly green, reflecting her spiteful, wicked soul. Now she stood behind a tall, dark tree, watching with jealous envy the happy water folk. She had a plan in mind. She would steal the baby Baldina, and when the prince came to rescue his baby girl, she would capture him also. Then she would have both of them, and poor Pure Gold would be all alone. She stood there watching unseen by anyone like a dark shadow of the night. The water fairies gathered together to dance around their garlanded pole, Misty joining with them. Pure Gold sat perched on her tree stump on the edge of the circle to watch. She did not join with them as she had to keep a watchful eye on her baby Baldina. Now Green Eyes saw her opportunity. She changed into the form of Blue Jay and flew down to the princess, offering her a cup of nectar juice in which she had put some sleeping potion. Pure Gold happily accepted the refreshments, little realizing her danger. As she sat watching the dancing and merrymaking, she suddenly felt so drowsy and sleepy. Her eyes drooped and she could not sit upon her tree stump. Calling to her husband, Prince Braveheart, she asked him to watch Baldina, while she took a rest in the shadows under the trees. Green Eyes watched, laughing to herself. Her evil, wicked plan was working. She let a little time pass while Pure Gold slept. Then changing herself into the form of the beautiful princess, she came out into the clearing and sat by Prince Braveheart on the tree stump. He was happy to see her, believing it to be his sweet wife, all rested and joining him again. The bright, glowing moon had slipped behind a cloud, dimming the festivities and its participants. Down by the river was the royal couple's floating pleasure boat. It was heaped with fragrant flowers and soft rushes to lay on. The prince and his family had spent many happy times floating on the river. Green Eyes' plan was to coax the prince and the baby into the boat. She would sing to him as they floated down the river, till too late he could be trapped in her lair. At the deepest, darkest part of the river was a sucking, swirling whirlpool. Beneath this was the watery kingdom of Green Eyes. The water fairies never drew near to this part of the river, as they knew once beneath her kingdom they would never return. Prince Braveheart picked up his little baby, and at the coaxing of Green Eyes walked to the river and stepped into his boat. He could never refuse his beautiful princess, as her happiness was his also. Laying in the soft rushes as the gentle current pulled them along, Green Eyes sang in her most melodious and seductive voice. The prince was enthralled and did not notice how much faster the boat was going as it floated towards the whirlpool. Closer and closer it came to her dark kingdom, and she was filled with triumph. Finally, the prince and baby Baldina would be hers. Trapped in her dark depths, they would never rise from its surface to see Princess Pure Gold and their people again. Suddenly, as she was singing, the moon came out from behind the clouds. It filled the dark night with its golden glow, chasing the shadows away. It shone brightly on Green Eyes' face as she stared at the prince, all the time singing her siren song. He looked at her with golden hair and glowing eyes. Green eyes that were green? He sprang to life. This was not his Princess Pure Gold. Her eyes were blue, blue as a summer sky. This was the wicked Green Eyes, and she had caught him in a trap. Whilst they had been floating down the river, Blue Jay had become aware they were missing. Flying through the trees, he had spotted the boat floating down the water to Green Eyes' lair. Immediately he alerted the fairy folk. Running to the maypole, they were unaware. They unwove their plaited ropes of flowers and grass, which was strong enough to take the pull of fairy dancers, weaving around the pole. Blue Jay took the longest, strongest rope in his beak and flew straight to the river. He must save his prince. Meanwhile, the prince was in a desperate struggle with Green Eyes. She had a fierce, claw-like grip on him, which he had to break. With a mighty twist and shove, he threw her into the water. The current swept her along and sucked her down into the whirlpool to her murky kingdom. He saw her hands upstretched, her hair floating out, and the look of rage and frustration on her evil face. But now the boat was moving faster to the seething, sucking whirlpool. He was in despair. Soon he and Baldino would follow her and be lost forever. Suddenly he felt something brushing over his head and shoulders. There, fluttering around the boat, was Blue Jay, the rope hanging from his beak. Braveheart grabbed the end, and Blue Jay, with all his might and great fluttering of wings, pulled back. Could he have the strength to stop the boat going to its watery existence? Slowly, slowly the boat stopped. Blue Jay tugged, and the boat moved towards the side of the bank. Blue Jay's strength was almost exhausted, but a gentle ebb of water pushed the boat closer to the edge. The prince leaned far out and, grasping a tree branch, pulled the boat to safety. Poor Blue Jay fell to the ground, his little heart beating and his breath almost gone. The prince gathered up the baby and jumped out of the boat onto solid ground. Picking up Blue Jay, he tucked him into his jacket and, with the baby in his arms, started walking back to the fairies' clearing. He had not gone far when all his people came hurrying along, cheering and clapping to see them safe. When they arrived back at the clearing, they gathered around Blue Jay, concerned to see him so still, almost lifeless. Princess Puregold took him into her hands, stroking and soothing him. She gently poured drops of nectar down his beak, and he slowly revived. Soon they were all back to normal, with a great deal to celebrate now. First, the prince and baby were safe, and secondly, Blue Jay was to be knighted for his heroic actions. But it was time for Misty to return home. Home before the golden moon slipped away and daylight would come. Waving to the princess and the prince and all her water friends, she ran through the thick, soft grass towards her home. She climbed up the moonbeam and slipped into her bed to dream of the next adventure she would have with the water fairies and Blue Jay in their magical kingdom. The end.